All right, and we're back, and we're going to talk just briefly about some other termination blocks that you might encounter out there, and then we'll get into a couple more details about our closet. Um, we had mentioned one of these blocks earlier, the Bix block, and we'll introduce a new one to you called the Krone block. These are other termination blocks that you might encounter and when dealing with telecommunications rooms. All right, let's take a look. Our Bix block, if you remember, this was the Nortel design block for, again, dealing with phone systems. So it had its roots in phone. I don't really think it's that common anymore. Most things have moved on to patch panels, but we'll mention real quickly just as a familiarity thing. Um, this is mounted in a frame that's hung on the wall, and I'm punching into both sides of the block for terminations. And here is a close-up of the block. As you see, it's almost like a two-sided 110 block. And the way this guy works, actually here's another close-up too of the Bix block showing you the insulation displacement, laying the wires in and punching them in. There's your Bix block punch down tool. Here's the punch downs for Bix block. Yeah, here's your punch down with your Bix tool in. The way this guy works, here's your termination block. You would punch in your horizontal cabling to the back of the block. It slides into a frame, and then the front is free to connect your patch cables to. So I could punch into the front here and then connect down to, again, phone switch, those kinds of things in my closet. Here is a Bix patch cable, if you will, that I could snap in the front, just like we looked at the 110 patch cable. That we'd looked at earlier. There's Bix blocks mounted into a frame. This would be anchored to the wall. When I do that, it starts looking like slow. So there's my frame on the wall. There's my Bix blocks slid in and kind of anchored in place. Again, cabling would come down the wall. I'd punch into the 110 block on the back, or 110, excuse me, the Bix block on the back, and on the front I have connections now for plugging my patch cables in, like I showed you. These guys right here, or punching in wires to connect to phone switch, that sort of thing. So there's your Bix block. There it is, kind of all together then. Wiring coming up the wall into the back. Then I have it free for connections to phones and other things. Other one you might run into is a Krone block. Krone, I think is the pronunciation. Krone block. This is going to look very similar to the other ones that you've seen before. Same kind of idea. Rows of pins here. I'm laying the wires in, punching in. Here is a frame on the wall that I'm putting my blocks into. There's my punch down tool for the Krone block, etc., etc. So those are other ones you might run into. But out of all these, 66 block tends to get used for phone. The 110 block tends to get used for phone and data. But really, we've taken the 110 block piece off and moved into the patch panel. So out of all this, you tend to see 66 blocks for phone and patch panels for data. That tends to be the common thing that you see. So we'll move on to some things about our closet. They talk about routing and dressing wires in the closet. Keep your wiring closet or your telecommunications user-friendly by managing the wires. My wires and cables should be run along wiring channels or trays. We'll talk about tray selection later this semester, but all my wiring should be in trays or channels. Using cable ties, Velcro ties, those kind of things to hold them. Making rounded corners. I know they use the phrase square corners in the book, but basically nice round corners as I'm going around things. We'll show you that in a minute. And then out of sight, above ceilings and behind things, so users in the building don't see it, but we have access to it as we need it. We don't want our closets looking like things like this. And this is not something that people set out to do. It just kind of evolves over time. As I like to say, doing the 1-minute fix of quick plug that in, and then realizing after the fact that's a connection to a server and you can never unplug it again. Whereas if they took the 5-minute job of routing the cable and plugging it in correctly, it could stay there and be neat. So it kind of evolves. Here's another one evolving. All kinds of, these look like modems and other things hanging down off the back. Yay. Here's a whole tunnel of madness, if you will. Whew. Kind of gives you the shivers. Here's another tunnel of madness, even wire strung across the top. That's awesome. Here's another one with the the laptop there in the middle. Yay! This is one of my all-time favorites. As you look, there's a little sign up here that says "Do not touch any of these wires," and then among all of these like suspended cables, there's actually a work light here hanging in the middle. That's just priceless. That's awesome. Here's another one that's kind of evolved. It's like, whoa, that's kind of a scary mess. There's another one. Yay. This one, I'm guessing the toilet is out of commission. I would hope it's out of commission. And there's just insanity. It almost looks like you can put spaghetti sauce in there and have dinner if you want. What I want is actually this. In my closet, I want to organize my wiring. I want to manage my wiring. That way, adds, removes, changes, adding things, removing things, moving things should be easy. Finding things, troubleshooting should be easy. So I should be looking at this kind of thing. And again, this takes planning, this takes time, this takes, you know, the extra 5 minutes when you're doing something to route it and put it in bundles and organize it. All the cabling coming in bundles to the back of patch panels that we're seeing here. All the cabling coming in the back of patch panels, into the back of patch panels here, into the back of patch panels. Now we're actually seeing these are cabling coming into front of the patch panel being plugged in. And then there's a whole, you know, kind of like server wall here with patch panels, everything organized. That's what you want. That's what you want to do. There's even a look up in a closet of all the trays and anything overhead supporting all the cabling coming in and out. There's the front of patch panels and racks, if you will. So again, keeping the wiring closet user-friendly by managing all the wires, should be running trays, secured in place, all those things that we mentioned. So as I start dealing with my wiring, I have solid and stranded wiring I'm dealing with. If you remember, solid horizontal wiring coming in, you know, from down the hall, down into my rack and punched into the back of the patch panel. So I have my solid wire. That's relatively easy when I bundle it because it kind of has a little bit of a memory. The stranded patch cables on the front don't have that kind of memory, and they tend to act more like wet spaghetti, if you will. So I have to organize and bundle this and give it places to go, trays and wire management panels, so that it doesn't be like spaghetti, but I can keep it organized. So I need to be thinking about supporting my permanent wiring. Again, horizontal cabling coming from down the hall, you know, above the ceiling, comes down into the closet. I need trays to support this till it gets to my racks. So I have to be thinking cable trays. We will add them to our plan later this semester, but we're at least going to get the ball rolling thinking we need trays to support this stuff. I need trays to support my cabling coming in and out of closets. Very much like if you think in our lab, all the trays above your head. Those would be the kind of trays you'd have in a data closet. You know, not in the middle of a room like we do, but in a data closet to support all the cabling going between my racks. I would do it that way. And here's some more trays. And as you notice, wiring coming around the corner, nice arced bends here. Nice kind of a waterfall down into the racks. Supporting my temporary wiring, I need things like wire management panels here. As cabling comes up a rack and across and into a patch panel port, I need a place to support it, but as you see, there's little openings here to add and remove wiring to it. So supporting temporary wiring, I need support as well, organized, but then there needs to be a way to get the wiring in and out. That's why you see those little openings in these things to route the cables through and hold them, but also take them out as I need to change them. And there's even special brands out there, Neat Patch and so forth, that allows you to organize the cabling to go from patch panel down here into switch ports and that kind of thing. My size of my closet, it will the size of my closet kind of depends on the layout that I need to deal with, or the layout I'm going to have in my closet. So real quickly, if I'm dealing with a small number of terminations, this could actually be a rack or a cabinet mounted to the wall. But if I'm dealing with a large number of terminations, hundreds of terminations from many classrooms or labs in the hall, I would actually need a dedicated closet with racks in there, distribution racks, wire management panels to support all this. Now, we're going to talk about, again, closets in a later chapter, but let's at least get the ball rolling of, if I'm dealing with a small number of terminations, as I see here, maybe 24 or 48 port patch panels and switches, I can handle this with some kind of small frame. Now, this is, you know, 24, 36 inches high, not very high, that would anchor to the wall, and these are usually hinged that I can kind of swing it out and work on the back. Here would be another style of cabinet on the wall that's actually locked, that I can have a switch and patch panel in, and possibly even routers and access points and other things that I might need. Now, think real quickly. If you've been in some of the large computer labs on Hack's campus, I think of some of the large ones that are in like Blocker Hall, if you will, where you might have 100 computers in there. I'm not going to run 100 data lines from a closet down the hall and into that room. So what I might do is run 2 or 3 fiber lines from the closet down the hall and into a room like Blocker, into a cabinet like this on the wall, and then run copper lines from here out to the computers scattered around the room. So I might have a small cabinet on the wall like this, or like this, or like this, to handle those 100 drops that are in that room. But if I'm dealing with a small number of drops, small number of connections, I could get away with a closet that small anchored to a wall. And even making this is actually kind of a cool one. This is very low profile. It almost fit behind a door. The patch panel and the switch in here is hinged, that I can work on it and then hinge it back in place, and the switch is mounted vertically, if you will, to take up less space in the wall. That's actually kind of a cool one. If I'm dealing with, 100 connections, 200 connections, like you might have on the second floor Midtown, like where our classroom is, I'm going to need a dedicated closet with racks in to store all my equipment and terminate all the connections. So I now need things like distribution racks, and they make them in 2-post or 4-post. 2-post if I'm dealing with just patch panels and routers and switches. 4-post if I start dealing with things like servers and UPSs. And if you think in our lab, we actually have both. We have 2-posts at your equipment, at your lab tables, and there's a couple 4-post racks along the side of the room that are housing UPSs, and they're even housing servers. Here's some more examples, even with some shelves and things in. Here, my switches and everything in place, and my cabling being routed into it. So I would need a larger rack system if I'm dealing with a larger number of connections, just like that. And here it is kind of all laid out in a room as well. And you notice there's plenty of spaces there to expand for future. Some other accessories and things I need to start thinking about are things like, we said before, cable trays and cable ties and wire management panels and all those kinds of things, and no sharp bends, and no Velcro cable ties, no staples, raceways, gutters. I need other stuff in routing my cable and supporting it. So as I start routing my cable, again, I need some wire management panels to support my cabling as it's going to from switches to patch panels and vice versa. And you notice they come in multiple sizes and shapes to accommodate the number of wires that you're dealing with. And we looked at a couple of these already, but we need these wire management panels. And as you see, this is some company's sales ad. Here's some trays. Then there's some vertical management panels. There's horizontal management panels. All kinds of stuff to anchor your cabling to organize it, that I can add and remove things to my rack. Proper location of my equipment is key, because I need to be thinking, again, future. And I mentioned this real quickly. I need to be thinking room in here to add switches and patch panels at a later date. So as I'm laying out my rack, I'm thinking, what do I need now, but could I add later? So I'm going to lay it out with some room. And there's actually tools out there to make diagrams to plan ahead. I can make a drawing to plan ahead to find out, will everything fit that I need, and do I have room? And we are going to do this later this semester too. We actually have a drawing program where we can draw out our rack and see if things are going to fit, and leaving room for expansion in the future. All right, let's stop right there. When we come back, we'll finish up the chapter.